So our sessions are now being recorded so that once they're done, we can make them available online. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen, because we want to, first and foremost, we want to share the agenda. And that's our agenda. You should be able to see that. Okay. So, of course, the name of these webinars, 2016, It's Your Time, Financial Training. And we have a very brief agenda, just for the benefit of persons who will be joining who are not a part of the last webinar session or the last live session. We're going to do just a glance overview of the last webinar session. We're going to do a review of the last live session, but only where it pertains to the income and the outgo sheet. We want to go back over that, take a look at that in more detail, and then once that's completed, suggest some next steps. And then we want to also briefly mention the new initiative that was kind of put out this week from a Four Corners Bahamas meeting, the initiative regarding sponsoring a student. So those are the three main areas that we're going to cover, and it should be review. Nothing is completely new. You would have heard all of this information before, but it's all worth reviewing. So with that said, let's go and take a look at our last webinar, what we discussed, and it was the biblical premise of wealth. And I'm not going to go into those slides. I'm just going to look at, go over this outline. We talked about the biblical premise for wealth creation. There is a biblical premise for wealth. We know that God did not intend for us to live a life of lack. He intended for us to live a life of abundance. And so there are scriptures that pertain to that in the Bible. Your true financial IQ was another area of discussion. And of course, for persons who will be reviewing this webinar, if you want the full outline of these topics that are discussed, we'll make sure that you have access to a link or my email so that you can request this information. We also talked about how your words affect your reality. So we mentioned about changing your words in order to change your world. In our last live session, Sean talked about how the change that we are pursuing really begins as a change in our mindset. So the Bible tells us that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So, if we think a thing, if we believe a thing, if something is in us internally, the words that we choose, the words that we use on a daily basis kind of reflect what's going on the inside. So a part of changing our words is really changing our mindsets, changing our outlook, changing how we perceive the world around us. And that can only come from education. That can only come from studying the Word of God, so that we have a mindset that lines up with what God says, as opposed to what the world says and how the world tells us that we should manage our affairs. A real look at your finances in 2016. That was the introduction of the financial worksheet that we used in the last live session. And we are going to take a little bit more of a detailed look at that today. We're filling out that financial sheet. We have one more week left in the month of February. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. Excuse me. We have one more week left in the month of February. So we want to make sure that for the entire month, we properly and accurately reflect our income and our outgo. So that sheet is going to help us. I just want to backtrack too, though. For the point on Change Your Words, Change Your World, there was an exercise that was suggested, and that was to record your conversation with another person for just a few minutes, just so that you could hear what what you normally say. Oh, excuse me, sorry about that. You can hear what you normally have to say on a daily basis, your daily conversation. And so I hope we were able to do that exercise just so that we hear what we're saying to ourselves and the things that we're speaking into our lives. Moving forward, yes, we mentioned that we're going to be looking at the worksheet again. We introduced the four corners model, what it is and why did you join, or why would you be interested in joining. And when we look at our financial sheet, we'll see in a minute that we have a section that reflects our income, and then we have like a larger section that reflects our outgo. And we suggested in the live session last week that we want to identify ways of increasing that income section, of growing our income, so that we are attracting, or we have access to more resources, so that we can be more fruitful, more effective, and we're able to do more, contribute more to our communities. What is $54.60 worth to you? Now that amount reflects how much it costs to join Four Corners in the Bahamas. But you'll see in a second that traditionally in the Bahamas, we suggested joining up at the $54.60 level. What we're now going to take a look at here locally is having persons join up at the $18 level. Most people in the US and in other territories, they sign up for Four Corners at $18. We in the Bahamas, we sign up at $54.60. That brings us in at level 3. But for persons who may have a difficult time coming in at level 3 at that amount, we'll give them the option going forward of signing up at the $18. Also, the last thing on the agenda that we want to discuss, the new initiative from Four Corners of sponsoring a student. In order to do that, we're suggesting sponsoring a student at the $18 level, and we are going to discuss that in a little bit more detail. And so, second to last point on our outline from our last webinar. Hi, Raphael. Thank you for joining us. Just wave. Thank you. Okay, so second to last point, what do you do now once you've signed up for Four Corners? And that's what these sessions are designed to help you with. What are some of the things that we should be doing going forward now as affiliates of the Four Corners program? And then the last thing, we briefly discussed the training format for 2016. So like we said, 2 weeks ago, we had our first webinar. Last week, we had a live session. Today, we're back to a webinar. Actually, what will happen next week? Next week, we will have another webinar session. And then on the 5th of March, we're going to go back to the live format. So we're going to have a meeting at our new location, March 5th. That's on Shirley Street, in the Shirley Street Plaza, in the Executive Business Solutions office suite. Beautiful setup there, very comfortable conference room setup. So we'll be moving our live meetings to that location as of March 5th of this year. Okay, so the plan is webinar, live session, webinar, live session. But just as we transition right now, what we'll be doing, just 2 webinars, today and next Saturday webinars, and then March 5th, we'll have our next live session. Okay, so that's a review. That wraps up our review from the last webinar and what was discussed. Now we're going to go into, I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen. And I'm going to do a different share screen where we're now taking a look at our income and outgo. And this is for February 2016. So at our session last week, everybody would have gotten the sheet. And they would have started to fill in the sheet. We have this section here. I mentioned about the fact that this is shaded in pink just to highlight that this represents a very small portion of this entire worksheet, and that's our income. Really, in our lives, for most of us, our income is just a very small section of our whole financial equation, or our entire financial picture. The rest of it, this light gray area, is monies that's going out. And you can see the vast difference. You know, we have this little section of income, but this huge section of outgo. We have expenses just going all over the place, from, you know, housing expenses, children expenses, debt, clothing, automobile, you name it, there is monies going out on a monthly basis. And what we suggested is, what we want to be able to do is increase this income section so that, you know, quite possibly over a period of time, we like to have an income stream set up for each of these sections. So we like to have a separate income stream for our kids. We like to have a separate income stream for recreation, for housing expenses, for vehicles, for, you know, just miscellaneous items. Whatever expenses you may have, we want to set up an additional income stream that deals specifically with that particular expense. But in the first instance, you know, a lot of people are interested in the conversation when we're talking about how we can acquire more monies. But if you're trying to bring in more monies and you're in a financial mess, you know, monies is leaking here, there, and everywhere, and we don't fix that, really, we're not helping you by giving you more monies, because you just have more monies to make a mess out of. So we need to first clean up some things. And of course, when we hear clean up, a lot of us dredge the word of cleaning, right? We don't like to have to go back and fix messes. But we have to be better stewards of the little that we have. And when we take proper care of the little things, we will see how God will increase that, and increase it more rapidly. So yes, it's uncomfortable. For many of us, it's something that we would prefer to avoid, but it's very necessary in growing our finances and growing our financial situations going forward. We need to take care of some things. So the proposal is, for each month of 2016 and going beyond 2016, that we fill out one of these sheets and that we make adjustments. And so hopefully over time, this pink section will grow. We'll have the additional income streams. And of course, Four Corners is going to be one of those methods outside of your regular salary. Four Corners is going to be one of those methods that we're suggesting will help you to grow your income section. But in the meantime, we have to clean up the outgo or the expenses and make sure that, you know, the areas that we're spending monies on, that they're bringing values into our lives. So when we look at what we're spending, we don't have a problem with it, because it's adding value to your life, as opposed to, okay, well, I spent $100. I went to the ATM, got $100. I don't know what I did with it. You don't know what you did with it. More than likely, it didn't bring any type of value to you, and it was just wasted. Okay, so we want to, you know, clean that up and avoid that going forward. So, like I said, for the most of us, I hope that we would have taken this seriously and that we have these sections figured out. What I want you to do next is, with this, the assumption is it's completed, right? You have all of these numbers figured out. And then at the end of the day, we are able to identify this particular column here, H45. What this particular cell shows is the difference between what we have available to us to spend and what we're actually spending. So this really represents what are we left with at the end of the month. For some of us, this particular value may be positive, but just a small positive. For some of us, it may be zero. Everything that you have coming in, you spend. For a lot of us, this particular value may be negative. And that's a reality. For far too many of us, it is a negative. Now, if we fall into any of those three categories, a small positive, a zero, or a negative, that means we have work to do. We need to simultaneously, we need to look at ways of increasing our income. And we also need to look at ways of cleaning up or fine-tuning our expenses. If you take a look at this particular cell here, H24, I would like us all to get to a point that we have an account that is specifically designated towards savings or investment, and the minimum balance on that account is $5,000. And we're not dipping into it for, emergencies or for lunch money or for BC or, whatever expenses. But this particular account will just be there for investment and savings purposes. The sole purpose of this account is for that money to grow. That's the only purpose, growth. So we mentioned in the last live session about how money was originally designed to grow or to multiply. Well, we want to set up this account where we see money multiplying, okay? And even if it means that, today we start that account with the minimum of, $50, $100, we want to make sure that we have this account. And however often we can, that we're contributing towards that account. Now, I have some suggestions as to, what type of account this should be. I think credit unions are good. I made the mistake a couple of years ago, and I'll share this story. I think it's a valuable lesson in this story. I made a mistake a couple of years ago. I said, you know what, I want an annuity plan for savings purposes. And, the whole purpose of the account, of course, of the annuity plan was for the monies to grow. So I went to my local insurance company, and of course, this is not a knock against insurances, but this is just the lesson that I learned, a very expensive lesson. I went to my local insurance company and I said, I want to set up this particular annuity because I want to have a college fund for my kids. And so, we filled out the application, did all of the paperwork, and they said, okay, well, now this is going to cost you $200 and X amount of dollars a month. And at the time, that was fine. I can do the additional $200 a month. So I said, okay, let's go. Let's set it up. 2 years later, my situation changed. So I couldn't afford the $200 a month anymore because I was just treading water and, trying to get food on the table. So the $200 was a stretch for me. And so I went to my insurance company and I was like, well, I can't, continue this payment. This is a bit much for me. And they said, if you stop the payment, everything that you contributed to that fund for the past 2 years is gone. So basically it's you continue paying or you would have lost all of your monies. Now, if you're in a situation where you want to set up something through your insurance company and you make monthly payments, that's fine. But the lesson learned for me was, do not sign up for anything where it is mandatory that you have to make that monthly payment. Because God forbid, if for 1, 2, 3, how many ever months, you cannot make that monthly payment, and they're telling you that you lose everything that you put into it. I mean, for me, it was, 2 years. So that was, let's calculate here. That was 24 months that I was paying about I think it was $238. That's how much money I put into this thing. And the minute I told them that I couldn't pay it anymore, I couldn't afford $200 a month anymore, that money was gone. So the lesson, and the very painful lesson, I mean, that I felt that hurt. So the very painful lesson I learned was, any plan, any type of savings that tells you that you have to put on a monthly basis a set amount, and the minute you cannot put that set amount, you lose everything that you've put into it, run to the hills, go far away. A better savings plan is, I can start off, I can put $100 into this fund. If next month, if I don't have the monies, then no worries, my $100 is still there. The following month, if you could put $2,000, fine, put your $2,000. If the next month, next 3, 4 months, you can't put anything, fine, your money is still there. It's still gaining interest. It's still growing for you, as opposed to the minute you stop contributing on a monthly basis, you lose everything. So just, wanted to share my very real and painful story, and a word to the wise, just in case you're looking at options, what type of account should I set up here? Go to a credit union and make sure, just say to them, well, I want to have this account when I can put monies on, then I'm glad to do so. What type of interest am I earning? The reality is, a lot of these savings accounts, these local savings accounts here in the Bahamas, they don't earn much interest. That's just the reality. So, if you're looking to grow it through interest, probably not the best plan, but in the least, look for something that you're not obligated to paying on a monthly basis. Okay, that's my suggestion. Okay, so the other thing with this sheet is, certain sections, like number 7. Number 7, I love this section just for the mere fact that I see section 7 as a challenge. And my challenge to all of us is to completely eliminate this number 7 from the sheet. So a lot of us have credit cards, we have car loans, we have vacation loans, we have student loans. We have been taught as a people that in order to get a lump sum of money, you do one of 2 things. You go into ASU or you get into debt. And with both of those models, it calls for paying out to other people, right? You go into an ASU, you have to throw a hand every month. That's fine. That's fine. If you're disciplined enough to do that, that's fine. If you get a loan, you're paying back on a monthly basis with interest. And not the interest that you're getting on a savings account, but an interest that's at a ridiculously high rate. So the goal is this debt section for all of us. We want to devise a plan to get rid of it. And so just to give you a suggestion here on how to get rid of this section. Let's say you have a credit card that you are currently repaying. And let's say your payment is $100 a month. The first suggestion for credit cards specifically is, number 1, cut it up. If you're not disciplined, if you're going to go in a store and see a pair of shoes or see a nice outfit and pull out that card, cut it up. Or put it somewhere where you don't have access to it, or give it to someone that you don't have access to it, that it's only for emergency purposes. But credit cards are a huge temptation for a lot of us. So it's best in that instance not to even have it. Okay. That's my first suggestion. Cut up the card so you're not tempted to use it. The second thing is, let's say you are making a payment of $100 a month on that credit card. What I would suggest is either increase the payment to maybe, something comfortable, $105, $110 a month, something that you can afford, but beyond what you're currently paying. And also a note, you should not be paying just the bare minimum. Because when you're paying the minimum, you'll never pay that card off. It's not worth it. So if your minimum payment is $60 a month, try and obligate a $100 payment to get that at a minimum $100 payment, just to get that at a manageable level. And if you can, each month or however often, add to that payment, add to the $100 a couple extras so that you can get that card paid off more quickly. Don't fall into the trap of, okay, all these banks are giving credit cards. I need a credit card for different banks. Credit cards are a huge, major source of debt. So, you may keep one just for emergency, for travel purposes, but you have to be able to control that. The other thing, let me just try and close this thing. The other thing is for other types of debt. So what do you have? You have loans. Again, devise a schedule where you can pay those down more quickly. I have a spreadsheet that you can, it's called a loan amortization schedule. It's what the banks use when they're calculating your loans and your payments. Some of you may have it, but I'll also make that sheet available. And at one of the sessions, we can discuss that sheet. It deals specifically with number 7, with section 7 on this income and outgo spreadsheet. But the whole idea is to identify a consistent repayment schedule for your debt. Now, the idea is to get it set up, get into a routine of repayment. And once you get into that routine, it's automatic for you. The idea is it should become automatic for you. Once it becomes automatic, you'll be surprised at how quickly or how soon those balances will minimize, or how soon those balances will shrink. And before you know it, maybe in a year, 2-3 years time, you've completely eliminated some of your debt. But it's worth the effort in the first instance to just go ahead and set up these repayment schedules and start on that road to debt repayment, okay? And free yourself up. And like I said, remember, we're working on decreasing debt and increasing income simultaneously. So while we're doing this, we're also looking at how we can increase our income, okay? Other areas. Now, I know, moving on from number 7, let's just go on to, let's go in the correct numerical order. So our first area of expense as it pertains to this particular schedule is housing expenses. That's your mortgage, your electricity, your cooking gas, your telephone, your water, your alarm, your cable, your maintenance, and home insurance. Now, a lot of us may not be able to do anything or not be able to do much about some of these areas. For example, BC, we can probably not use any appliances in our house, and we still have a huge BC bill, especially in the summer months. But let's, take a look at ways that we can decrease in other areas. For example, your mortgage, or you're paying rent.
With regard to the mortgage, if it's really a strain, maybe it's worthwhile having a conversation with your bank and asking them if there's a way that you can refinance your mortgage in order to ease the burden. So what you do is you make that monthly obligation a lower payment. Now, what's going to happen there is you're going to, yes, they're going to increase the term of your mortgage. But like with the debt section, let's say from an additional stream of income, once we start getting additional income coming in, let's say you're able to generate an additional $500 a month. You can go and put 300 of that onto the mortgage, onto the principal of the mortgage. So refinancing your mortgage, you are easing the burden of your monthly obligation to the bank. Yes, they're going to increase the term of that mortgage. So if you have 10 years left, they may do it whereby, they add 5 years, they add 10 years onto the life of the mortgage. But the way you shrink that again is when you have the extras from your additional streams of income, you go in and you pay over the counter onto the principal of your mortgage. And that will shrink again the life of the mortgage. But guess what? You are doing it instead of on the bank's terms. That's bringing you a lot of stress and headache. Instead of doing it on the bank's terms, you're doing it on your terms. So you get to a place of, I'm making a comfortable payment amount. But when I'm able to, when I have the extra funds, I can go in and I can make a payment over the counter, and that is chopping off or decreasing the life of that mortgage. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But that's one way of kind of easing the burden there of if you have a kind of a high mortgage payment. Cooking gas, telephone, water, alarm. A lot of these other expenses under Section 3 are pretty much set amounts. If you have like cable TV and you have all kind of different packages, are they really necessary? You have to make that decision. Are they necessary? Can you cut out some of them? Do you really watch TV or cable TV like that? Maybe a better option over the long term would be to get a box, or to get a more basic plan. I know Cable Bahamas would have recently gone up on their fees. We didn't have a say in that. But, for some people, I know people who said they do not subscribe to cable TV. They get a box, and it's much cheaper, much more affordable. So some of these decisions, we may have never considered them before, but there are some things that we have to now start taking into consideration if we're going to grab hold of our expenses. Food. That's another area where, you have to eat, and the cost of groceries in the food store is more expensive. Unfortunately, the more healthy foods are more pricey. Junk food is a little less pricey. But maybe there are some things that we can do in terms of food. Maybe you can start a backyard garden and you can grow things like tomatoes and onions. And, one of my sisters, actually, she just told me about an organic farm out in the Cowpen Road area, where they slaughter animals for fresh meat. So you can get your chicken or your mutton or your lamb, whatever it is, and the prices are very affordable. They have free-range organic eggs that you can get. So instead of the traditional food stores, maybe we need to start looking at other ways of buying our foods, of growing our foods, in some instances, and leading to healthier lives. Because the reality is, too, our lifestyles are killing us. The level of stress, the foods that we're eating, foods that are being imported into the country, for a lot of us, it's literally killing us. So not only are we finding ways of cutting back, but if we were to grow some of our own foods or find persons who produce local products at a decent price and support them, we are helping our pocketbooks as well as our health, our overall health and life expectancy. Insurance, I talked about that, and my experience with the endowment. I now no longer have my endowment plan. Cost me, around $6,000, but it is what it is. Life insurance, that's a set amount. Health insurance, of course, that can be very pricey. It's important. We don't know necessarily how things are going to pan out with NHI coming on stream and health insurance. In some cases, it may mean that employers will drop the private plans. If you work for a company that has private health insurance, in some cases they may drop that plan just to take on NHI, and you may have to cover that cost if you want to maintain that insurance coverage. But that's something that you'll have to take a look at for yourself and your family, or maybe start the process of shopping around to see, if there are other companies that you could possibly go to get a better deal. Auto expenses. The big suggestion for this category, a lot of us, of course, all of us pay car insurance on an annual basis. And normally you'll hear people say, oh, I have car insurance this month, so, I'm going to be a little strapped for cash this month. I would suggest that you develop the habit of, if you know your car insurance is $1,200 annually, each month put aside $100. So that way, when the insurance becomes due, you already have money saved towards it. So you don't have to come up with that $1,200 lump sum payment. You would have been making a contribution towards your car insurance payment all along. Same with home insurance. If you have to pay that, put aside each month a portion of the overall total amount, so that when it becomes due, it's not such a burden. It's not such a strain on you. Car license and inspection, same thing. It's not, if you split it up across 12 months, you won't feel it as much as having to insure and license and inspect your car the same month. That really takes its toll. Now I'm getting a notice here that I only have 10 more minutes to continue on with the webinar on Zoom, and we have this entire other section to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this discussion for our next webinar, and by that time too, we're going to get into more detail on this income segment and how we can grow this income section of our income and outgo. But for now, just to wrap this up, I would encourage you by saying, continue to work on this, especially as February comes to an end. Continue plugging in the numbers so that you have a clear picture of what your income and your expenses look like for the month of February. And then that will be basically your launch pad or your building ground going into March. And each month we build on the previous month, okay? So I'm going to conclude the discussion on this sheet here just for the sake of time, and we'll pick up with that during the next webinar, possibly also during the next live session, okay? And of course, if you have any questions on that, feel free, shoot me an email, let me know. But it's definitely a conversation worth having. Okay, so for the last 10 minutes, we are going to talk about the latest initiative or the latest proposal put forth by Four Corners Bahamas, and that is to sponsor a student. So the idea is we have all of these students graduating from high school within the next couple of months. Our economy is still somewhat stagnant, And so you have these kids, some of them, a lot of them are not going to college. The reality is there's not a lot of job opportunities available to them. But once they get out of school, their needs, they don't change. They have financial needs. What we are proposing is, and what Four Corners Bahamas is proposing, is to identify affiliates, identify partners who would be willing to sponsor for students. So basically, you're paying at the $18 level, level 1, you're paying for them to join the program. Now, when they join the program, the idea is they can use their enrollment as initiative for friends, family members, loved ones to sign up under them. And once they sign up under them as a part of their network, they will help them to build a business, build an income stream for themselves through Four Corners. So the way it would look is, you sign up for kids. The person who would have, I guess, who's one of the leaders of Four Corners here in the Bahamas, he would have approached one of the local schools already and talked to the principal. And so, hopefully they're on board with the idea, and we'll have other schools coming on board with the idea. But we identify students that we can sign up for the program. Of course, you have to involve parents. You can't simply just sign up people's kids for stuff and they're not in agreement. So the communication will go forth to parents, just letting them know about the program, about the possibilities for their child, and requesting their permission for sign up. Once the parent and the child has an understanding of Four Corners and how it works, then we're going to help them basically solicit sign-ups for their network. So the most obvious approach is for them to go to persons in their families, in their communities, and say to them, look, I'm trying to set up my financial future. So there's this opportunity for me to basically help myself financially, start a business. And all it requires from you in terms of support is an $18 sign up. Of course, you have the option. You can come in at $54.60, and then, of course, we'll explain to them what coming in at $54.60 means. But at a minimum, persons can sign up under these students as $18, and they would see it as a way of investing in them and their financial futures. We're primarily targeting 11th graders, 12th graders. In the case of 11th graders, that gives them a full year to build their network, and they can in turn use the proceeds from building their business. They can use the proceeds that will help them pay for college and defray some college costs. And then of course, there are other expenses like graduation and examinations and all of the expenses that come along with someone coming out of high school and preparing to go into the working world. So we're helping these kids in two ways: by investing in them financially and by investing in them, helping them to set up businesses that will take them into the future, lucrative businesses. And secondly, we're investing in them by sharing our knowledge with them, mentoring them, and helping them along the journey of building their Four Corners business as an income generator. And, for a lot of kids, the reality is a lot of kids in our community right now, they have responsibility for their households already. You see the kids who are packing groceries, who are selling items on the side of the street. Whether it's illegal or not, they're out there doing it because their families have needs. And so if we can help some of these kids become financially independent, not only provide for themselves, but they're providing for younger siblings. And for parents, in some cases, who, for whatever reason, they're not able to go out there and work themselves. And it has huger implications for our community at large. So, so that's the latest initiative from Four Corners. The next step, what my direct team, what we're planning on doing is just drafting a proposal to take to another school and present it to the principal, to tell them how we plan to use Four Corners to invest in the lives of up and coming graduates. And of course, if it catches on, when it catches on, it can be offered to even lower grades, you know, your 10th graders, your 9th graders, your 7th, 8th graders. They may want to get an early start. Also, you may have persons, or there may be persons in your family who are school aged, and you want to get them exposed to the business. There's no reason why you can't, you know, sign them up at the $18 level and then watch their business grow. So by the time they graduate, they have a fully functioning, lucrative business. So there's the possibilities are endless. There are just so many ways that we can use this as a tool to help people financially in our communities. Okay, and so like I said, proposal going forward to other schools. Just promoting Four Corners as an income stream for young people. And also we want to get permission forms going so that for parents and schools that are interested, we want to make sure that we do things properly, set things up properly from Jump Street, and we have parents' permission. And from there, we help the kids learn more about the business and grow their own individual businesses. So some exciting things. Four Corners Bahamas is fairly new to the Bahamas, and so the sky is the limits. And we're going to push and make sure that we do everything in our endeavor to make this a very successful venture for Bahamians. Okay, and yeah, that's about it for today. Thank you so much, Angela and Raphael, for joining the webinar. Sorry, I don't have time for questions. I'm so sorry about that. I'll try and make sure we include a question and answer segment for our next webinar. But thank you so much for joining. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. So be blessed, stay safe, and